Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Plink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today, we're looking at a video from a channel called Meaningful Coincidences. It's a channel that deals with a number of conspiracy theories about ancient advanced civilizations, parapsychology, sacred geometry, and positing that everything that happens is happening for distinct reasons beyond the mere physical happenstance. In this particular video, they're attempting to argue for intelligent design based on a number of, as the channel's name implies, coincidences in cosmology and the environment. They're specifically aiming at three supposed proofs for a creator God. And hey, there doesn't seem to be any argument from objective morality or cosmological arguments or ontological arguments in sight, so at least that's a nice change of pace. So let's let them kick things off and start making the case for intelligent design of the universe.
There are three scientifically proven evidences that God really exists. 1. The perfect mathematical relationship with the Earth, Moon and Sun. A perfect solar eclipse only occurs as the Sun is 400 times further away from the Moon to planet Earth, and the Moon is 400 times smaller than the Sun and hence the perfect fit.
Okay, so our first proof for God's existence is going to be all about math and the cosmos. I've run into cosmic numbers and measurements as a proof for a creator God a few times before, but they do tend to be rarer arguments for God in my experience. And I think the primary reason why they are so rarely made is because they're just flat out wrong, and provably so, unlike something like a morality-based argument. And this first claim is a perfect example of how provably wrong these kinds of arguments are. The distance between the Earth and the Moon, as well as the distance between the Earth and the Sun, are constantly changing. The distance between the Earth and the Moon fluctuates from 225.6 thousand miles, or 363.1 thousand kilometers, at its closest, to 252,000 miles, or 405.6 thousand kilometers away at its farthest. And because of the Moon's non-circular orbit, which only takes 27 days to complete, these distances change rapidly throughout the course of the month. The distance from the Earth to the Sun, on the other hand, changes throughout the course of the year, not a single month. So its fluctuation takes much longer to go from closest to farthest. But at its closest, the Earth is about 91.4 million miles, or 147.1 million kilometers, away from the Sun. And at its farthest, the Earth is approximately 94.5 million miles, or 152.1 million kilometers away from the Sun. Now, break out your calculators, friends. But if we take the shortest distance between the Earth and the Moon, 225.6 thousand miles, and we times that by 400, we get 90,240,000. That is more than 1 million miles short of the shortest distance between the Earth and the Sun. And if we take the longest distance, it gets even worse. Longest distance between the Earth and the Moon is 252,000 miles. Times 400 gives us 100,800,000 miles. That is 6 million miles farther away from the Sun at its farthest. But what if we just took the averages of both the Sun and the Moon and their distances, not their extreme closest and farthest? Well, average distance to the Moon, 238,900 miles, times 400 gives us 95,560,000. About 2.5 million miles farther than the Sun's average distance of 92.9 million miles away. So, in no way is the Sun a perfect 400 times farther away from the Earth than the Moon. Also, the Moon is not perfectly 400 times smaller than the Sun. The Moon is 2,159.1 miles in diameter. Times that by 400 is 863,640 miles. The Sun, however, is 865,370 miles in diameter. The Moon is actually closer to 401 times smaller than the Sun. And finally, your claim that the moon fits perfectly over the sun during a solar eclipse is also wrong, which is why we can get the ring of fire when a solar eclipse occurs. The moon can come close to covering the sun, but not entirely, not perfectly. And you started off claiming that the fit and the ratios were perfect. After all, a perfect God would be able to make these measurements perfect. Well, clearly they're not. They're close, but close is not perfect.
It takes 27.3 days for the Moon to orbit the Earth, and the Moon measures 27.3% of the planet it orbits. It takes the Sun 27.3 days to rotate around its own axis.
As for the Moon-Earth size, in one way of looking at it, it's 27% of the Earth, sure. But that's just in terms of diameter. But there are other ways to compare the Earth and the Moon sizes. In surface area, the Moon is only 7.4% of the Earth. In volume, the Moon is only 2% of what the Earth is. And in terms of total mass, the Moon is only 1.2% of the Earth. There are lots of numbers and measurements for the Moon and the Earth. And the fact that two totally unrelated numbers, the diameter and the time that the orbit takes, happen to line up is utterly meaningless. Especially when you try to make it more impressive by throwing in the bit about the sun taking 27 days to rotate on its axis. Because this isn't technically true. See, the sun is not a solid celestial object like the Earth or the Moon. It's a ball of gas. So it actually rotates at different speeds at different latitudes. At its equator, the sun rotates approximately once every 25 days. But at its poles, it only rotates once every 35 days.
Also, the average human pregnancy is 273 days.
I don't know where you came up with that. The standard goal for a pregnancy is 40 weeks, or 280 days. Every study of actual pregnancy length that I could find puts the actual average at 268 days. Without showing any sources to back up your claim, I'm left to conclude that whenever numbers are close, but still clearly off of what you want them to be, you just fudge them a little to make them fit the coincidence that you want to see. Also, what does the length of a pregnancy in days have to do with the percentage of the Moon's diameter as compared to the Earth? Could those two things have less to do with each other?
108 Earths side by side would fit perfectly within the diameter of the Sun, whilst 108 diameters of the Sun lined up side by side equals the distance of the Earth from the Sun, and 108 diameters of the Moon lined up equals the distance of the Moon to the Earth.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
All right, let's crunch some more numbers. So, 108 Earths could fit into the diameter of the Sun perfectly? Well, the diameter of the Earth is 7,917.5 miles. Times that by 108 gives us 855,090 miles, while the diameter of the Sun is 865,370 miles, a difference of almost 10,000 miles. You could actually get another Earth and a half into the diameter of the Sun. So it's more like 109.5 Earths could fit into the Sun. You say 108 suns could fit perfectly between the Sun and the Earth? Well, again, the distance between the Sun and the Earth fluctuates throughout the year. But if we were just going to take the average distance of 92 million miles, let's crunch those numbers. The Sun is 865,370 miles in diameter. Times that by 108 gives us 93,459,960 miles. That's about 1.5 million miles too long. So it's actually more like 106 suns could fit between the Earth and the Sun. 108 moons could fit between the Earth and the Moon, you say? Well, again, the distance between the Earth and the Moon fluctuates. But if we're taking the average distance between the Earth and Moon, that of 238,900 miles, let's crunch those numbers. The Moon is 2,159.1 miles in diameter. Times that by 108 gives us 233,182 miles. That's about 5,700 miles too short. So more like 110.5 moons could fit between the Earth and the Moon. You're off, guys. You're off by a factor of multiple Earths and suns and moons. This is not perfect at all.
The circumference of the Moon multiply the circumference of the Earth equals the circumference of the Sun.
Don't you ever get tired of being wrong all the time?
That is the most egregiously wrong thing you've said yet. This is not anywhere close to true. You were like way, way, way off. The circumference of the Moon is 6,786 miles. Circumference of the Earth is 24,901 miles. 6,786 times 24,901 equals 168,978,186. The circumference of the Sun is 2,720,000 miles. So you're off by 166 million miles there, buddy. Like, everything else that you've said so far has been somewhat close but ultimately still not exact, or even close enough to say close enough. But this one? What numbers were you working with or faulty calculators were you using that gave you this outcome? You are colossally off base here.
There are 86,400 seconds in a solar 24-hour day, and the Sun is 864,000 miles in diameter.
Your first number is right. There are exactly 86,400 seconds in a 24-hour day. Your second number, however, is wrong. The Sun is not 864,000 miles in diameter. It's more like 865,370 miles in diameter. But even if it were 864,000 miles exactly, that still doesn't line up with the seconds in a day. Why did you add the extra 0 to the end of it? You know 864,000 is a hell of a lot bigger number than 86,400, right? Those aren't the same number.
All the planets in our solar system lined up together side by side fit perfectly between the Earth and the Moon.
Not when the Moon is at its closest point, or even if we use the average, mean lunar distance. Planets of our solar system, with or without Pluto, cannot fit within the mean lunar distance. An additional 3,500 kilometers is needed to squeeze in Neptune. Apogee, when the Moon's orbit takes it furthest from the Earth, is 406,700 kilometers away. So with or without Pluto, the solar system can fit between the Earth and the Moon, but only near apogee, not at the average lunar distance, and certainly not at the closest lunar distance.
432 is the ultimate sacred number, which has been found encoded in most ancient civilizations throughout history, representing highly advanced lost astronomical knowledge. The speed of light, miles per second, equals 432 squared, the size of the Sun. Diameter in miles equals 432,000 multiplied by 2 number of seconds in a 24-hour day, 43,200 multiplied by 2 the size of the Moon. Diameter in miles equals 4,320 divided by 2.
Wow. Everything in this is wrong. Okay, so to start with, the idea of 432 being some kind of sacred number for most ancient civilizations, I can't find that claim anywhere. It is associated with Hindu teachings about the cycles of time, but that's the only place I can find any reference to 432 being of importance to any ancient practices or teachings or cultures. Besides, we all know what the real sacred number is.
The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is 42.
And 42 is not 432. And then everything that comes after that is wrong. The speed of light is not 432 squared. 432 squared is 186,624. The speed of light in miles per second is 299,792,458. The square root of the speed of light would be 17,314.5158176. The sun's diameter we've already covered. It's not 432,000 times 2, which would be 864,000. We've already covered that. The sun's diameter is 865,370 miles. You are right about the number of seconds in a day being 86,400. But why are we multiplying it by 2? Where did the 2 come from? Why are all these equations either multiplying or dividing by 2? If these things were supposed to be perfect, then shouldn't the sacred number in question be 864 so that it perfectly lines up with the seconds in a day? I mean, not that it would, because you would still have to add 3 zeros to the end of it. Why are you doing that? Oh, that's right, no reason at all. Just to get the numbers to where you want them to be. But then the size of the moon is wrong. 4,320 divided by 2 is 2,160. The moon is 2,159 miles in diameter. It's close, I know. It's only 1 meter off. But again, you started this off saying that the numbers were perfect. And a perfect creator God should be able to make these perfect. Well, it's not perfect, friend.
2. We live in a Goldilocks environment. Our planet is close enough to our sun that can trap heat to keep water liquid, however far enough away that the planet does not become too hot. A perfect spot for life to thrive. And thanks to the placement of Saturn and Jupiter, Earth's comfortable temperatures is supported by the orbit of Saturn, and Jupiter protects our planet from a high number of dangerous comets which enter our solar system from the outer reaches by absorbing them.
The fact that Earth is in the Goldilocks zone of our sun is no great and unique feature. Every star has a Goldilocks zone, and most stars have planets orbiting them, some of which are within the habitable zone. We've discovered many exoplanets, those being planets that orbit around other stars, that are also within the Goldilocks zones of their suns. Some are even better suited for life to evolve and thrive than Earth itself. These are called superhabitable planets. And researchers at Washington State University publish research that states that out of the over 4,000 currently known exoplanets, they've narrowed those down to 24 candidates being superhabitable planets that could be even better suited to life than Earth. So what would the rationale be for a creator God to put his most favored creation on a less than optimal planet when there were so many other better options available? And to further the point that Earth is not so special by being in the habitable zone of the sun, we aren't even unique within our own solar system. Mars also falls within the Goldilocks zone and gets the same kind of asteroid protection from Jupiter that we get. We aren't even special in a system that only has 8 planets in it.
And our human species can survive, just, on the highest, hottest, and coldest zones on Earth, on Mount Everest, highest, Dalol in Ethiopia, hottest, Oymyakon in Russia, coldest. We cannot go any higher than Mount Everest, as coincidentally the highest landmass on Earth is also the highest humans can travel without oxygen support, as the air gets thinner the higher in altitude and less oxygen is taken in with each breath. The town Oymyakon, in Far East Russia, is the coldest permanent human settlement on Earth and has some of the coldest temperatures ever recorded to as low as -71°C in 1924. The hottest settlement, Dalol in Ethiopia, may not hold the record for the highest ever recorded temperature, but it has the overall average annual temperature of 35°C as the hottest inhabited place on Earth. The summer heat pushes 40°C and above. So humans have been designed to operate, just, at the Earth's extreme locations in terms of altitude and temperatures.
There's a lot wrong here. Dalol is not the hottest place on Earth. Oymyakon is not the coldest place on Earth. And while you did get it right that Mount Everest is the highest landmass on Earth, humans cannot survive at its peak long enough to claim that we can survive there in any meaningful way. The hottest place on Earth is Death Valley in the United States. It holds the record for the highest air temperature on the planet at 56.7 degrees Celsius or 134.1 degrees Fahrenheit. And no, humans can't survive there for any great length of time. There is a reason why the place is called Death Valley. Dalol in Ethiopia is the hottest permanent human settlement in terms of average temperature. You even said that yourself.
The hottest settlement, Dalol in Ethiopia, the hottest settlement.
Well, of course, humans aren't going to settle somewhere that is too hot to survive. So, no, we can't live in the hottest places on the Earth. And the same is true of the coldest. Oymyakon is not the coldest place on Earth. That would be the Eastern Antarctic Plateau in Antarctica, which has been recorded as low as -94°C. In fact, Oymyakon only ranks 6th on the list of coldest places on Earth, and a full 27°C warmer than Antarctica. Again, Oymyakon is the coldest human settlement with the lowest average temperature. Just like humans don't set up a permanent settlement where it's too hot to live, humans don't set up a permanent settlement where it's too cold to live. So no, we can't live in the coldest places on the planet. And as for being able to live at the top of Mount Everest, well, no, not for any meaningful length of time. At an altitude of 8,848 meters, you would likely suffocate in minutes. However, for people who have made the journey over the course of a month, it's possible to survive at the peak 4 hours. So only people who have conditioned themselves over a long period of time can last any length of time. But even then, the best suited people in the world will still die within hours without oxygen tanks. If you can't even last a day in a place, I think it's fair to say that humans can't survive there. And hey, you went with the hottest and the coldest places on Earth, even though both were wrong, and then you go to the highest, so why not check out the lowest? That would be Challenger Deep, an area of the ocean floor about 10,900 meters deep. Nuclear submarines can generally only safely go down 300 meters, so special ultra-low-depth submersibles would be needed to get to the lowest point. And it's safe to say that no, humans could in no way, shape, or form survive there for any length of time. So overall, in every which way you could possibly look at it, this claim of humans being perfectly suited to even the most extremes of the planet is patently false. But there's another wrinkle that we also need to mention before we move on. Whatever we can survive on this planet in terms of extremes is not due to some idea of a creator god making this planet to perfectly suit us. It's the exact other way around. We adapted to the conditions on this planet. That's exactly how natural selection works. This planet, with its climates, has existed since long before Homo sapiens came about. And those who could better adapt to the climates on the planet were more successful and reproduced more, passing those adaptations down to their progeny and spreading them throughout a populace. Those who could adapt to the environments around them thrived, while those who could not perished. So us being somewhat suited for life in some parts of this planet is not evidence for intelligent design. It's evidence for evolution by natural selection.
3. The same consistent temperature is throughout outer space and the universe is flat. In the observable universe it has the same temperature throughout, with only a tiny deviation of less than 0.001 degrees from an extreme 2.725 Kelvin, minus 270 degrees Celsius. Thermal equilibrium has already been achieved across every aspect of the universe. However, heat normally requires time to travel from one side to the other side, and even at the fastest speed possible, the universe has not been around long enough for this to occur, making this finding remarkable.
It is true that the temperature in space is about negative 270 degrees Celsius, but that isn't remarkable at all if you understand just what temperature is. Temperature is a measurement of the speed at which particles are moving, and heat is how much energy the particles of an object have. So in a truly empty region of space, there would be no particles in radiation, meaning there's also no temperature. Not low temperature, no temperature. Now, of course, there are almost always some scant radiation and small amounts of particles floating about in any given region of space, but so little as to keep the temperature relatively stagnant. And to say something like heat requires time to travel through the universe, well, that's not how that works, I'm afraid. Heat, as we think of heat moving through our understanding of thermodynamics, does not travel through space. This misunderstanding is why some people can't understand why the Earth being closer to the sun during the northern hemisphere winters, thinking that being closer to the sun should mean a warmer temperature, just like being closer to a campfire makes you warmer. But that isn't how it works, because heat doesn't travel through the vacuum of space. Energy does. Energy gets radiated through space, and when that energy comes into contact with a lot of particles, like those on a planet or other celestial body, the energy gets transferred into those particles, speeding them up and generating what we call heat. If there are no or too few particles to absorb that energy, then there's no heat to speak of.
Another surprising finding, by a number of various independent sources, confirming that the universe is completely flat with only a 0.4% margin of error. Thank you for watching and...
What the fuck? That's it? You're just gonna throw out that the universe is flat and not even attempt to explain what that is supposed to mean? Or why that supposedly points to intelligent design? Because the phrase itself, the universe is flat, doesn't make much sense. Flat generally gives the impression of something that is or is close to two-dimensional. Something with length and width, but not height, like a piece of paper. But the universe is clearly three-dimensional space, length, width, and height. So you really should have explained yourself to get around the counterintuitive notion of the universe being flat. But I'll go ahead and fill in the massive blank that you left. So, when cosmologists are investigating the shape of the universe, there are basically three possibilities. A flat universe, a universe with a positive curve, and a universe with a negative curve. Current findings point to the density of the universe as being balanced and the equivalent of around 6 protons per 1.3 cubic yards, and that it expands in every direction without curving positively or negatively. In other words, the universe is flat. We still have 3 spatial dimensions. There's just no positive or negative curve to the universe. As an example of this, in a flat universe, 2 rockets next to each other will always remain parallel. This is unlike in a positively curved universe, in which the paths of the 2 rockets will diverge, trek along the curvature of space, and eventually loop around to meet where they started. And in a negatively curved universe, the rockets will separate and never cross paths again. So that's the basics of what it means for the universe to be flat. But here's the kicker. There's no reason to think that a flat universe is intelligently designed. Nothing about a universe with no positive or negative curve even hints at the idea of a creator behind its formation. I have to assume that this is the reason you didn't bother to explain what a flat universe even meant and just jumped right into your outro. Because you couldn't even fabricate a way to claim that a flat universe points to a God's existence. So that leads us to the end of these 3 attempts to use coincidence, math, and measurements to attempt to assert the existence of God. The vast majority of these claims were based on totally wrong data. When the data was correct, it wasn't perfect enough to claim an all-powerful fine-tuning, which would have been able to make the measurements 100% perfect. And the once or twice that the data did line up perfectly, you couldn't explain why that was supposed to point to any kind of supernatural deity and not just an instance of random mathematical synchronicity. Or in other words, it's just a regular coincidence. So thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Till next time, I'm Professor Plink, reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.